emailing it to the people who were not able to attend live. So, hi everybody. I think I'm live on Facebook. I'm Jamie Hartman, and this is the weekly question and answer that I do every week. Today is August 27th, 2020. My quick disclaimer: important that you know that I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. I do not diagnose or treat any disease, and because this is just general information, I don't have a relationship as a client practitioner with any of you. Remember, this is just general information only, and it never should be a substitute for your medical advice. You want to consult with your own medical provider before enacting anything I suggest or any other changes to diet, supplement, medication, or exercise programs. So real quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, the questions that were submitted. First of all, last week, I know we had, we kind of ran out of time, and I thought this was such a good question that I'll talk about this a little bit some more. And that's just basically when people know they need to do AIP, but they have trouble making it stick, some tips. And so I'll talk just a little bit about that toward the end. These two questions were submitted, one about reintroductions. The person said they're sorry, I might have asked this before. That's fine, ask away. I don't expect people to go back and watch all of the recordings, all the archives of this. And the question has to do with the stages. You know, we get this nice chart when we look at reintroductions on AIP, and you see that maybe it implies you're supposed to reintroduce everything that's in stage 1 before you're allowed to move on to stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4, and what would happen if you went out of order. So I'll talk just a little bit about that. Another question came in about recommending a probiotic. And then we had, I'm going to actually answer this next one first and then go backwards. I want to show you the question, and then I'm going to stop sharing so that my face turns big here and I can kind of make eye contact with you a little bit more. This question comes from Kim. I'm going to read it to you. And then the second part is also from her because I want to talk about these together. So she's talking about her husband to start with. After first being told he had lung cancer, but then having several biopsies that were negative for cancer and instead only showing inflammation, my husband was diagnosed with GPA, which is also known as, and I'm not 100% sure I pronounce this the way the doctors do, but Wegener's, I think that's right, which is also known as granulomatosis polyangiitis. It is, by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, an autoimmune condition. He started megadoses of prednisone, then many IV treatments, steroids, etc. And these are similar to chemo in that they kill the good antibodies with the bad. I want to talk about that a little bit. The doctors have told him to avoid gluten and dairy, but that's about it. I'm worried about his gut microbiome. He's now on some kind of antibacterial antibiotic 3 times a week for a very long time. Obviously, his immune system is severely compromised, and we have to be extra careful in this age of COVID. What is the best thing I can do nutrition-wise for his immune system and gut health? P.S. This is a pasta and bread person. I get that totally. Who has substituted gluten-free versions of those. I can't imagine getting him to eat AIP. And then Kim's second question is more about herself. So she says that she started listening and reading about paleo/AIP over a year ago via the Paleo Diet / the Paleo View podcast. I've also listened to Angie and Mickey's podcast. Although I have not been diagnosed with any autoimmune disease, I'm convinced I'm on the cusp. Weird things have been happening to my body, like the tips of 2 random fingers are painfully cracking and peeling in the middle of the summer, and it isn't just from washing our hands. Yeah, I get that. And my elbows became all peely and scabby. The doc would just slough it off, pun intended, as just a little eczema. I've never had that before. I've also gained a lot of weight, but they say my thyroid is fine, even though I ate 700 calories a day for 6 weeks and barely lost 10 pounds. I'm going to pause there just for 1 second. I know I kind of want to get the whole question before I start answering it, but eating only 700 calories a day for 6 weeks is really, really hard on your body. That's starvation. That is malnutrition, starvation, famine rations. My question would be if Kim and I were in a relationship of a coach and practitioner or nutritional therapy context, my next question would be, give me the timeline on that. Like, when did you do this dramatic, serious calorie restriction? And when did the eczema and all of that correlate? You know, what is the timeline here on that? Because my mind is going to, I'm wondering if some of this eczema that she's experiencing could potentially be nutrient deficiencies, and from the fact that when you're eating only 700 calories a day, you are like guaranteed, not only are you not giving yourself enough fuel, but there's no way you're getting all the nutrients. You need all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the fatty acids. So we would talk about that. That would be one of the things we'd really talk about. I'd also ask her to tell me a little bit more about her thyroid and what they say about it being fine, but that's not the only issue here. So her question is, how do I determine if I have an autoimmune disease, and does it even matter? That is, should I just try the AIP? I've done bone broth and take probiotics. I have been on and off. And she says recommended by Dr. Sarah. And I should clarify here, I don't believe she means that Dr. Sarah is her doctor. I assume she's talking about Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, who is, one of my teachers, one of my mentors. And she's a doctor by way of being a PhD as a medical researcher, but she is not a physician. And she is definitely not Kim's physician, unless this Dr. Sarah is somebody else. So I think that's important to remember, just because somebody says this probiotic is good, or I take this probiotic, or I recommend it to my clients, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one for you. So keep that in mind. And I know I had a separate question submitted by someone else about probiotics that I'll talk about. And then she says she's been on and off any kind of alcohol and she's still all puffed up. I don't think I really need to go full on AIP. Any suggestions about what might make a difference? Okay, so I'm gonna, just because I know it's nicer to see my face big, I'm gonna just stop sharing here, which will bring kind of me back up to being full screen. And I wanna talk a little bit about Kim's questions. And I'm gonna make sure that I have the ability to go and look at them as I'm talking here. So I'll go back and forth between these two screens. Computer screen, sorry guys, it's just not big enough for everything on it at once. Yeah, here we go. Now I've got both things. Okay. So when Kim is asking about, first of all, what her husband needs and what she needs, my first response would be, let's try to figure out some way to get these aligned. Her husband has an autoimmune disease. Now, the good thing about the one that he has is that some people kind of get over it, so she would want to, he really, and she, I'm assuming they're kind of working as a team here, would want to be talking to the doctors about whether or not they think that he's going to need to take some maintenance medication, or if this is something that is just for now and he may not have to take it forever. What is their impression of that? They may not be able to give a specific answer about that, but that'd be one question I would suggest asking, is just, what's the prognosis on this? Do we think this is something he's going to have to keep taking all these medications forever, or will he possibly be able to wean off of them? But either way, doing AIP right now would probably be very helpful for him. And I get this whole, like, he doesn't, he'd prefer to keep eating his gluten-free pasta and bread. I mean, who wouldn't? But I think there's a strong case that could be made for AIP benefiting him. But if she needs to present it to him in a way that might make it a little bit more kind of acceptable, palatable to him, it could be kind of like the medication scenario. Like, he may not need to do it forever. It may be something that he just needs to do for a period of time to help his body kind of get the immune system back under control. And then reintroduce foods, expand his diet. Clearly his doctors have already planted the seed in his mind that food matters, because if they've said go gluten-free and dairy-free, which is awesome, very few doctors in my experience in the past anyway have even gone that far, but that is great. If they're already kind of warming him up to that. Doing full AIP would be a challenge. It's a challenge for everybody, especially for someone who wants to be eating pasta and bread. But I think presenting it to him as something where we could try, and then to lead into her question, it's kind of beautiful, because it can be something Kim can present to him as something we can do together. It would benefit both of us. She's recognizing that her health is not the way she wants it to be. She's done some, study and research and understands a little bit about paleo / AIP. So she may find it to be a good idea that they do it together. And again, it could be framed as a short-term thing. Like, we could do it for 30 days and just see, and if AIP just feels like way too much, maybe start with doing a whole 30. That's something that a lot of people do in the new year. And you could think of September as kind of a fresh start. It's coming up September 1st. It's just around the corner. We're going to do a Whole30 in September if full AIP feels like too big a leap. You know, that whole 30-day kind of thing, there's nothing magical about 30 days, but I do find that a lot of people, it helps them get started to just put that kind of container around it. And that's exactly what I did. You know, long before I ever was gutsy by nature, before I started my blog, before I even like thought about sharing my story or much less becoming an NTP and a coach and starting to help other people, I did this myself. I went from a standard diet. It wasn't even a gluten-free diet. It was just a standard eat a lot of food diet because I was underweight. And, you know, my main focus was just on that. So it's kind of similar to people who are trying to, in a way, you know, trying to lose weight. My whole focus was on like, how do I, you know, make the numbers on the scale move? And it wasn't working. I came across, you know, in those days, it was 2013. I found first the specific carbohydrate diet, SCD, which is really geared toward people with gut issues, specifically ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease primarily. And I told myself, and I don't know where I got the idea from, but I told myself that I was going to do this for 30 days. Like, and no matter how much it sucked at day 10, 15, 20, 25, I was going to keep going. Like, just no matter what, like I was going to do it for 30 days. I just like committed to that. And then at the end of the 30 days, I was going to just reevaluate. And I told myself that at that point, I would either say that wasn't worth it and quit and just go back to the way I used to be and be done with it and say I gave it a good shot and just be fine with that. Or it would be at least starting to give me enough benefit that I would want to keep going. And I just decided that, like I just said, that's what's going to happen. I'm just not even going to think about whether I'm going to keep doing this for the next 30 days. I'm just going to do it. And then on day 31, I'll figure out what I'm going to do next. And I'll be honest with you, by day 20, probably 2/3 of the way through that first 30 days, I had a pretty good sense that I was going to do at least another 30 days because I was seeing some improvement and it wasn't sucking as much as I thought it would, to use a very colloquial term. But like, I thought, you know, this isn't that bad. I'm figuring it out, you know, and I'm actually finding some pretty tasty foods to eat. And I'm starting to feel a little bit better, a little bit, you know, not 100%, but I want to keep going. So when I'm talking with people, coaching people, clients, you know, just talking with people about making a big change like that, get it out of your brain that it needs to be a for the rest of your life change. Because if it does become a for the rest of your life change, it's going to be because it's what you want to do, right? It's going to be because it's not as hard as you thought it was, it's going pretty well, or the benefits are so fantastic. So just think of it as 30 days to start with. That's my advice to Kim for kind of just, you know, making the case to her husband, but ultimately it has to be his choice. I like the fact that she thinks she could benefit from it too. The other thing I would say to Kim and her husband is that I'm a little confused about the medication story here. You know, she mentions steroids, and I know that for treatment of this particular autoimmune disease, they'll often give some pretty intense immune suppressant medications, but I'm not sure what the role of antibiotics would be. So if we were working together, if her husband was my client, I would be asking him to, you know, well, let's go over your medications. That's one of the things that I can provide as a health coach. I am not a licensed medical care provider, but as a health coach, I can help you review what you've gotten from, you know, what information you have from your doctors and what information you might need to ask them for more, you know, information to get some answers. So that would be one of the things that I would want to help them to get some clarity on, because she's talking about his gut microbiome. And that's probably not our primary concern, honestly. Like, I think we hear a lot about that now. We hear about gut health, we hear about probiotics, to circle back to that other question that was submitted. And it's important, but you know, you can only do so much with your gut microbiome that will be beneficial if you're not also thinking about what you're feeding yourself every day. So it's kind of like, you know, doing maintenance on your car. You can do all the maintenance in your car, but if you continue to put the crappy gasoline in the tank, you know, you're going to continue to get the same results that you had been getting before. So we have to look at all of it. I think that kind of covers everything. I'm going to just take a quick skim here over Kim's questions. You know, as far as if I was only talking to Kim and we weren't bringing in her husband into this, I would probably recommend that she start with a Whole30, because she's right. She possibly doesn't need to go full on AIP. But on the other hand, there's a ton of resources out there that help with just trying AIP. You know, even if you don't have a really compelling case to do it. I think there was a time a few years back where it really felt like you just had cut out everything that would be good, you know, to eat. But now there's so many recipes and resources and even prepared foods that you can use to fill in the gaps and programs that support that. I know that, you know, I'm not currently taking new clients, but I will be very soon. And I also know that there are other coaches like me who do take clients. And then Angie Alt's program, Sad to AIP in 6, and Kim already mentioned that she listens to Angie and Mickey's podcast, so she's heard Angie's voice before and knows who she is. But that might be a good thing to consider, you know, to get them started if that's something they want to do. So I hope that helps, Kim. I'm gonna look right into the camera here and try to make eye contact with you in that weird Zoom sort of way, but I hope that helps. Yeah, I think I kind of covered everything I wanted to say about that. And yeah, my heart goes out to you though. And I got to give you a major credit here for thinking about your husband like this. You know, it's hard to be the spouse of somebody who's going through a major health crisis. I'm sure it was such a relief to find out he didn't have lung cancer, but then to find out it's actually maybe a potentially chronic condition is scary too, you know, so my heart goes out to you. The other questions that were submitted, one was about reintroductions. And so let me talk about that for a few minutes. And really it's talking about the order in which you reintroduce foods. Just to level set here for anybody who's new to AIP, AIP starts with an elimination phase where you cut out everything that's potentially problematic for a person with an autoimmune disease. And you do that for a minimum of 30 days. Many people find that doing it for a little bit longer than 30 days is best for them. Maybe they do it for 60 days or 90 days. You want to have experienced some significant improvement in whatever it is that is your primary reason for doing AIP. Doesn't mean you have to be 100% in remission, healed, like you don't have the illness. You know, that is not necessarily the case, because your healing will take time and will continue even after you start reintroduction. So I think it's, you know, reintroduction phase doesn't mean that you just have quit caring about what you're not eating, you know, because you're continuing to maintain AIP, the elimination phase, you're just adding foods one at a time. So that's what happens in the reintroduction phase. And then the foods that you've eliminated that you're to consider reintroducing are organized into 4 stages, just to give you a sense of which foods are the best to start with and which ones are best to put off until much later in the process when maybe your health is even better. It's a good way to think of it. Like those stage 4 foods, you're reserving them until you're in your best possible shape, you know? So maybe it's going to take you years before you're feeling really, really great again. I hope not, but maybe it will. And so that doesn't mean you can't reintroduce any foods until then, but it might be a good idea to hold off on the stage 4 foods until then, because the stage 4 foods are the ones that are most likely to provoke your autoimmune disease to be problematic for you. The stage 1 foods are the least likely, and also in many cases have a lot of benefit to them. So there's that scale, that balance that we weigh here. So the question very specifically was, do you have to reintroduce everything in stage 1 before you can do stage 2? And what happens if you go out of order? So you don't have to do anything. There are no AIP police, there's no AIP law system or AIP jail. You could do whatever you wanted, but the idea is to try some foods in stage 1 and see how you do. And if you're still feeling really good and things are going well, you can then feel pretty confident that your autoimmune disease is stable enough, your health has improved enough, you've built up the reserves that you need to be able to handle, to be able to tolerate some of the foods that might have a little bit more of a potential for being problematic, and a little bit more and a little bit more until you get to those stage 4 foods. I usually give people the general kind of guidance that you should feel like you could do at least 3 or 4 foods in stage 1 with ease before you start thinking about 2, 3, and 4. And that's just, especially if you're doing this on your own without a coach who's kind of helping you, guiding you, or giving you some feedback on it. You know, you really want to feel like you got the process down and your body is, you're recognizing your body's signals before you start giving it something that's a little bit more challenging. So what happens if you go out of order? Well, that really depends. You know, they're not magical. Your body isn't going to necessarily know that you jumped around. And in fact, sometimes when I work with clients, I will actually recommend they jump around a little bit because of what I know about their individual personal health. So that's one of the benefits of working with an AIP coach, because we've had experience doing this with lots of different people and kind of getting a sense of like, you know, I know a lot of people who have maybe a similar diagnosis or similar experience as you, who did really well with, you know, whatever food, and it's good to maybe do it a little bit earlier. But of course, everybody's individual. So even with a coach, we're still kind of hedging that a little bit. But sometimes what happens when you go out of order is nothing at all. Sometimes it might mean that you have a reaction that takes a long time to recover from, right? That's very possible. You could reintroduce a stage 4 food. You know, you're like, I'm just ready to eat tomatoes. They're in my garden. They look gorgeous. I want to eat them. And you just go and dive right in. And if you are somebody who's sensitive to tomatoes and you haven't been kind of working on your autoimmune health by doing AIP for a long period of time, it's possible that could give you a significant setback. I don't want to plant any fears in anybody's mind, but you know, that's why we say wait till the stage 4 foods till later. Yeah, I'm just looking at that. I think that's kind of it for the reintroduction question. And then the other question that was submitted this week was about recommending a probiotic. And the question was really short. Can you recommend a probiotic? And I could just give you a really quick answer and say no. And I don't mean that to be kind of being snide or anything, but I don't like to recommend specific brands of any kind of supplement, because I know what it's like to work with individual clients and to see that there is not one size fits all. I could tell you what probiotics and what brands I've taken and which ones I thought were helpful and which ones weren't, but there's no guarantee that your body is the same as mine. In fact, it almost certainly isn't, even if we have this similar diagnoses. There are probably other factors that are different. I generally actually, when I'm working with clients and I've done a full intake and I'm looking at all their symptoms and I'm looking at what they're eating, recommending a probiotic is not the first thing that I do. In fact, I may actually recommend, if they were taking one, that they stop taking it. And instead, we're going to try to rebuild their gut microbiome by supporting it with some naturally fermented foods and some prebiotics. These days, I've been a little more inclined, if I am going to recommend anything that's a supplement, it might actually be a prebiotic supplement rather than a probiotic supplement. So I know that's not really an answer to the question, because I'm sure even though it was phrased, can you recommend a probiotic? They were hoping I would recommend one, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to tell you which brand or anything. I'm going to resist that temptation to be very specific here, because everybody's unique. My experience with probiotics has been that they generally, if you want to experiment with one, there's no harm. Usually the worst thing that happens if you're using a probiotic that doesn't do anything for you is that it just doesn't do anything and you're wasting your money. I've never really seen people take a probiotic that made them feel any worse. So I think you can feel pretty confident experimenting, trying some different ones and seeing if any of them sort of click for you. If you don't want to take one at all, that's totally fine too. Then the only other question was, again, I'm saving this to the end and I keep running out of time, and it was talking about some tips for sticking with AIP for more than a week. And I think, you know, the number one tip I can give for that is to take things one day at a time. You know, one of the big overarching thoughts here is that this might be something I have to do for the rest of my life, but I guarantee you it will not be as hard as it is for the rest of your life as it is in those first few weeks. No matter what, it gets easier. It absolutely 100% for sure is going to get easier because you're going to get more comfortable with it. You're going to start to see the rewards of it. You're going to find ways to make it easier. I think it's important to remember too that the idea of willpower and just like kind of forcing yourself, being strong, is a myth. You know, we don't accomplish hard things because we have willpower. We accomplish hard things because our brain has figured out how to make them less hard. You know, our brain has figured out how to make them have a reward. Our brain has figured out how to make them more achievable, you know, kind of breaking down the insurmountable mountain, taking it one piece at a time. So I think that my tip for today is to just focus on whatever is right in front of you when it comes to sticking with AIP. Focus on the fact that you're going to eat this meal, get through this day, and then you're going to repeat that tomorrow. And it is going to get easier. It is. So if you guys have other like more detailed questions about that, other tips you want me to talk about, please send them in. I'm happy to kind of go over more of that sort of coaching part of it. I like answering the technical questions, but also really like talking about some of these lifestyle ones too, and helping people figure out how they can make this work for them in real life. So I think that is it. Just a real little quick, let me see if I can go back to sharing. Yeah, so just a real quick reminder of my disclaimer and that I will be back to do more Q&A next Thursday. Take care, everybody.